the stories, the journey, the wild behind the scenes, and much more. I'm Dave Anthony, and I'm the host of From Garage to Stadiums. Mark, as you said, with Green gone, drummer Mick Fleetwood emerges as the band's leader. Tell us a bit about Mick, his personality. Where did he grow up?
Well, Mick's father was a wing commander in the Royal Air Force, and he went to a number of different what's called private schools, fee-paying schools. So you get minor royal family members and politicians there, and he was absolutely useless academically. The only thing he was good at doing was playing drums, fencing. He was very good at fencing, and dressing as a woman in school productions, because of course they're boys' schools. So he was very tall and slim and feminine looking. They stick a dress on him, and he could play Ophelia in Shakespeare. But he was absolutely useless academically. But his parents supported him, and he moved to London when he was 15, lived with his sister, and was playing in bars and clubs when he was 15, 16 or thereabouts. The one thing he wanted to do was music, and the one thing he wanted to keep going was Fleetwood Mac by any means that it took. So it's like the guy would he's stuck with them through thick and thin. So it doesn't matter how many people leave, he will find someone else to replace them. And hope for the best.
He's the one constant throughout the band,
Absolutely,
isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
And a little known tidbit, he married the sister of someone relatively famous. Tell us about.
He was married to a fashion model called Jenny Boyd, whose sister Patty Boyd with George Harrison for many, many years. In fact, he married Jenny Boyd twice. He divorced her and then married her again, and then they got divorced again. But I mean, those sisters must imagine what life was like for those sisters in the 70s. One of them's married to George Harrison. One of them's married to Mick Fleetwood. He's like, hard work. It's hard work.
That's hard work. That defines hard work. In what has to be one of the most incredible against the odds stroke of luck in the history of rock, we've got this Era 2 band that's, as you said, unknown in the UK, transitioned to the US, traveling around the US, trying to get rolling again. They go into, I guess, Mick goes into Scout Studios. Tell us what happens. That's probably the seminal moment that puts this next era over the top.
Yeah, he's in a recording studio up in the hills, isn't it? Up in LA, and that's right. He's gone grocery shopping. Bumps into a guy who works at the studio, and
this is one of the luckiest grocery trips ever taken.
It's one of the greatest, and that store is still there. This guy comes up to him in the store and recognizes him, says, "I'm working out at this studio, Sound City, I think it was called," and says, "Look, why don't you check it out?" And Mick Fleetwood's going, "Well, I'm looking for somewhere to make the next Fleetwood Mac album." So he goes up there, and while he's there, he's introduced to the producer, a guy called Keith Olsen, who I interviewed a few years ago. He's no longer with us. And what Keith said, he could put on some music to demonstrate the sound of the desk. And what he put on was a couple of tracks by a folky sort of boy-girl duo called Buckingham that he'd been looking after and producing. And they were in the studio themselves at the time, coincidentally, in another room. He puts on this song. Mick starts sort of, the words were grooving along. That's what they say. So he started grooving along. Every time Mick Fleetwood tells his story, though, it just becomes more sort of romantic and wonderful. Glimpses of beautiful Stevie Nicks through the glass, and he hears this amazing guitarist who reminds him of Peter Green. Anyway, long story short, he goes away. Bob Welch phones him up and says, "I'm leaving the band." So he's like, "Oh, Christ, we're back to that again." It's just him and the McVies. And then he's like, "Aha. But I saw this amazing duo." Well, he wanted Lindsey Buckingham, the guitarist. And of course, the story is that they had to come as a pair. But he took them out. They all went out for lunch together or dinner together in a Mexican restaurant. And, a few margaritas later, they all get on great. And it's like, hey, well, you can join the band as well with Stevie Nicks. So he takes the pair of them on, which, of course, is the best thing that could have possibly happened.
Yeah, that's an unbelievable story. And to have two women in the band at the same time was quite something in the 70s, I would think.
Yes, it was. I mean, and they were treated as second-class citizens by a lot of people. They toured with other bands. They couldn't believe that they had two women in a group. There's a famous story about them being on stage during sound check and like a production manager from the theatre coming in, get those broads off the stage, get those broads off the stage. They thought they were someone's girlfriend.
Oh my goodness.
They thought that was it. But this is why Christine, if you ever interviewed Christine McVie several times, she's the toughest cookie, was the toughest cookie imaginable. And so is Stevie Nicks in different ways, because they had to deal with this sort of bullshit. But for over a decade at least. Right.
Tell us about Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham at that point in their careers. Where were they from? How did they meet?
Yeah, well, they met. They were at the same high school, and they met for about 10 minutes in a sort of after-school music club. I think the story was that Lindsey Buckingham was playing that Mamas and Papas song,
California Dreamin'.
And Stevie Nicks came over and sort of threw in a few harmonies. And then Lindsey Buckingham was playing in a sort of college band. And then a few months later, they got Stevie Nicks in as the singer. But they weren't together as a romantic couple. They were involved with other people. But the general feeling was that, for her, she said that as soon as she joined that band, she saw herself as a pop star. And so she was on a mission to go somewhere else. And I mean, that group supported, I think they opened shows for Hendrix and various other people, whoever came through the university circuit on the West Coast. And then they decided to go off on their own. And like I said, Keith Olsen, the producer I mentioned before, he'd seen them. He said, look, get rid of the band. I'm not interested in the band, but I'm interested in you two. And he signed them, and they got a little record deal. They made an album that didn't sell at all, wasn't promoted. And they were living, she was waitressing. She was waiting tables.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm an artiste. I have to stay at home. Right.
Yeah, but she was even cleaning houses, I read.
Cleaning houses. She's waiting tables. And she worked in a burger chain. And he would stay at home just kind of playing guitar, having a smoke, being creative, writing his songs. I don't know why she didn't just tell him to get out there and get a job.
Right.
But she stuck by him, and that's what, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's interesting. Tell us, what are their respective personalities like, the two of them, do you think?
They're very funny in different ways. Lindsey Buckingham takes things very, very seriously, took the music very, very seriously. I've noticed over the last few years, the last time I interviewed him, which would have been 2021, I think, he'd lightened up a little bit more.
Yeah,
he was quite intense, but that intensity is what they needed. He was absolutely focused on, I want the band to sound this way, producing the set records, helping other people's material. She, of course, was not a traditional musician. She couldn't play the instruments that he could, but she had this way of singing, these way with melodies. And a lot of what she did was kind of counterintuitive if you're a songwriter. Used to drive Lindsey Buckingham mad. Like, you can't rhyme. You got too many words in here. That doesn't make sense. But it made sense. You listen to a song like Dreams.
Yeah.
He's like, you can't do that. Well, I'm doing it. So the two of them, it's this weird sort of dynamic.
Yeah. She's almost like a poet, and he's kind of the craftsman of the music.
Absolutely. So he's constantly trying to sort of mold it into a more conventional shape, I guess. And she's like, no, I'm doing it my way.